Good morning and welcome to the September and pumpkin spice season open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Now, before we start, I want to do something a little different today. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the wildfire on the island of Maui in early August that resulted in a lot of lives lost, people still missing, and thousands of homes and structures that will need to be rebuilt. And then later in August, we had Hurricane Idalia tearing through parts of Florida. And I think it's fair to acknowledge that these kind of storms are becoming more severe, more intense. And here at the FCC, we've really recommitted to doing whatever we can to assist with recovery with respect to communications. So I just want to take a moment and do something we haven't done before and acknowledge the staff in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, specifically the folks in the Operations and Emergency Management Division who serve on the ground and really assist with communications recovery. They are heroes, and I really want to call out their work this morning. So let me just start with Tim Perrier. When the wildfires struck on Maui, Tim deployed to Hawaii on a FEMA mission assignment, and he led a team conducting spectrum surveys, assessing their impact to public safety communications and also to broadcast services. And then, of course, Hurricane Idalia hit, and while Tim continued to work on response from the wildfires, he also analyzed data from a team that was deployed in Florida to inform FEMA response and restoration priorities. That means he was working across a lot of time zones with very little sleep. Then there's Vion Cummings. Vion also deployed to Hawaii, where he partnered with Tim to conduct spectrum surveys, keep FEMA informed about public safety communications, and he was really unflagging, just so you know. He had to drive through fire and smoke-ravaged areas to provide communications connectivity information to firefighters, FEMA emergency response, and other public safety officials. I also want to acknowledge Juan Silva, the newest member of this division. Juan hit the ground running. He served in the Hawaii Emergency Operations Center as a liaison between the FCC Spectrum Survey Team and the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, coordinating our response. And then as soon as Juan returned from Hawaii, he volunteered to deploy to Florida, where he resumed his long days by conducting spectrum surveys and supporting FEMA's response to the hurricane. Then there's Jamie Rivas. When his colleagues deployed to Maui, Jamie reviewed the survey data they provided and prepared FEMA with in-depth analysis of the status of communications in the disaster area and locations where survivors found shelter. And of course, when Hurricane Idalia struck, he didn't stop. He deployed to Florida on just a few hours' notice, where he worked day and night conducting spectrum surveys. I'm highlighting their work at the start of this meeting because I really want to make sure everyone knows the work we are now doing to assist with communications disaster response, and I want to thank the team for their deep commitment to public safety. In addition, I want to acknowledge we have 8 FCC staffers on the ground in Maui right now supplementing this work by helping survivors access services they need to rebuild their lives. So I want to thank our staffers from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Space Bureau, and Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. They're helping eligible households enroll in the Affordable Connectivity Program and training community-based navigators with communications policy and ACP enrollments. So that's Bike Bonan, Jessica Campbell, Jeanette Kennedy, Alma Hughes, Miriam Montgomery, Lindsay Tomes, Chantal Virgil, and Darshawn Williams. And those enrollment efforts are really vital for people who need to rebuild their lives. In addition, let me just give a call out to the folks who work on our disaster information recovery system. That data is really important. We used it during the Maui wildfires and also during Hurricane Idalia, and that includes Michael Kaofa and John Healy, and they are assisted by Ismari Cueto, Tia Cromwell, Joanne Smith, and Sandra Beshan. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge the Chief of the Operations and Emergency Management Division, that's Justin Kane. He oversees our disaster response operations, and he manages a whole lot of moving parts in disaster. So thank you, Justin, for coordinating all this good work. And with that, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you, and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 5 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking on facilitating and expediting application processing for satellite and earth station operators in order to advance opportunities for innovation in the new space age. Second, you will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking on the implementation of the 5G Fund for Rural America in light of new, precise, and verified mobile coverage data gathered through the broadband data collection. Third, you will consider a report and order to strengthen the Commission's direct access rules in order to stem the tide of illegal robocalls, protect the nation's numbering resources from abuse by foreign bad actors, and advance other important public policy objectives tied to the use of numbering resources. The accompanying second further notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment on the duties of existing direct access authorization holders. Fourth, you will consider a second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking that would adopt spectrum allocations and a licensing framework for commercial space launches, ensuring reliable and predictable communication services for the private companies that have increasingly vital role in U.S. space activities. Fifth, you will consider an Enforcement Bureau action. This is your agenda for today. Please note the Media Bureau item entitled Updating Obsolete TV Broadcasting Rules and listed as item 4 in the September 14th Sunshine Notice has been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. The first item is titled Expediting Initial Processing of Satellite and Earth State Applications Space Innovation and will be presented by the Space Bureau. Julie Kearney, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Kearney, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I'm honored to be here today to introduce a Space Bureau item to be considered at a Commission meeting. Today, the Space Bureau will present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that streamlines its policies and procedures to expedite the processing of satellite and Earth station applications. This report and order and further notice, if adopted, will support the Commission's efforts to keep pace with a space industry that has entered an era of unprecedented growth, which is fueling an increase in both the complexity and the number of applications for space services before the Commission. Joining me at the table from the Space Bureau are Troy Tanner, Deputy Chief, Stephen Dole, Associate Chief, Janine Poltoneri, Deputy Chief of the Satellite Programs and Policy Division, and Julia Millette, Attorney Advisor in the Satellite Programs and Policy Division. I also offer the Bureau's thanks to our colleagues in the Enforcement Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Office of Engineering and Technology, and the Office of the General Counsel for their assistance with this item. Julia Millette will present the item. This is Julia's first presentation at a Commission meeting. And now to Julia.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Given the rapid evolution of the commercial space industry and the corresponding increase in satellite and Earth station applications, this report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking would adopt rule changes and policy initiatives that will advance opportunities for innovation in the new space age, as well as seek comment on further measures to expedite application processes for satellites and Earth stations. These rule changes and initiatives are designed to promote a competitive and innovative marketplace for space services. The report and order would create a transparency initiative within the Space Bureau, which would provide information and guidance in a variety of forms to potential applicants to help them understand what to expect in the application process. The report and order would also eliminate certain rules that can delay or prevent satellite applications from being accepted for filing. Specifically, the order would eliminate a rule that requires dismissal of applications not in conformance with the International Table of Frequency Allocations. This will enable staff to fully consider requests for waivers on their merits rather than dismissing requests for non-conforming spectrum use. The report and order would also eliminate what is known as the licensed but unbuilt systems rule, which prevents non-geostationary orbit satellite system licensees or grantees from filing another application for use of the same frequency band if they already have an authorized but unbuilt system. The report and order would also expedite the initial processing of new applications by establishing timeline goals for putting applications on public notice, or alternatively, notifying applicants that staff have identified errors or omissions. These timelines, which are 30 days for GSO and Earth station applications and 60 days for NGSO applications, would apply to all types of applications and provide applicants with clarity on their application status at this crucial initial review phase. The report and order would also create a new streamlined process for Earth Station operators to add satellite points of communication under certain circumstances, under which the application would be auto-granted if not otherwise acted on by staff within 35 days after placement on public notice. The further notice of proposed rulemaking would consider even more ways to facilitate application processing. It would seek comment on additional changes to our rules to expand the list of minor modifications that could be made by licensees without prior commission approval, and on identifying additional circumstances under which Earth stations could add points of communication through an auto-grant process. It would also propose a new type of license for Earth station operators who have not yet identified a satellite point of communication, which could facilitate the development of new Earth stations. The further notice would seek input on a special temporary authority-like process that would be applicable to satellite market access grantees, which do not currently have an option to file special temporary authority. The further notice would also seek comment on whether there are ways to make our special temporary authority filing process more efficient, and on expanding certain timeframes for filing renewal applications, both of which could provide additional flexibility to applicants. Additionally, the further notice would ask about establishing timeframes for taking action on the merits of applications and on ways to avoid potentially duplicative coordination processes, and on other procedural rules that may be updated or eliminated to facilitate the filing process and reduce paperwork. The Space Bureau recommends the adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges solely for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear comments from the bench. We will begin with Commissioner Carr.
Thank you so much. The reality is that the space industry in America is booming. We're seeing record levels of investment. We're seeing rapid innovation in products and services. And the global competition, of course, is fierce. So we want to make sure that we always have the back of America's space entrepreneurs, that we're not holding them back. On this front, I think we get a lot of credit to a lot of leaders in DC who are forward looking at this. At the end of the day, I think the playbook here is one that we use in a lot of contexts, which is more spectrum and going faster on whether it's infrastructure or applications here. That's sort of the two-part playbook that works. And this item, combined with another item that we have, number 4, it might have been good to put them together, but we'll see about that next time. But we tackle both of those, more spectrum and going faster at the FCC. So those two things combined, which we're doing today in separate items, are both good things. And on both of those fronts, we've seen a lot of very good, strong leadership on Capitol Hill as well. On the spectrum side, in particular, I want to recognize the work of Senator Schmidt and Senator Hickenlooper. They have their legislation, the Launch Communications Act, which would go a long way to bolstering the spectrum efforts when it comes to America's leadership on space. I really want to thank them for their forward-looking work. I think a lot of what we do here echoes and takes our cues from the work that they're doing in the Senate. And then on the application side, going faster, Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Pallone have done some great work on streamlining with their legislation over there. So I think we take cues from all of that. And it's important because at the end of the day, you know, our FCC rules across administrations haven't kept up with the pace of change that we're seeing in this area. And at the end of the day, that contributes to a bottleneck that we really have to resolve in order to continue to allow America's entrepreneurs to flourish. In fact, one analysis showed that for companies seeking licenses in the U.S., the average processing time takes over 2.5 years, and obviously that's slowing down an industry that is trying to accelerate. And aside from sort of the sheer increase in the number of applications being filed, they're also more technically complex at the same time. So it's more and more difficult to do, and that's always a challenge. The time needed to build and launch satellites, the risks involved can be significant for satellite operators. We're talking substantial CapEx, substantial OpEx. So we have to keep moving forward. So I'm pleased that we're doing so today, both on the spectrum side and on the application side. I will not redo this statement when we get to item 4, so we'll go faster at that point, at least on my end. But of course, as a good friend of mine says, laurels don't make a good place for resting, so we got to keep moving forward. I think, adopting shot clocks, for instance, would be a great step. I want to thank Commissioner Symington for some of his leadership on that and pushing for some more comment on that. I'd like to do that. More spectrum, obviously, ensuring that our U.S. operators aren't disadvantaged by our rules, and of course, continue to work with Congress so we can deliver, lasting, permanent reform. So thanks so much to the team for your work on this item. It has my support.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. When we proposed to streamline our satellite application rules just last December, I said that supporting U.S. leadership in commercial space meant moving at the speed of space-based innovation. I also said that it meant creating a path towards regulatory approval, even for applications that propose something new, and perhaps even especially for systems that challenged the old playbook. And so that's why I am pleased we've reached an order so quickly. I'm deeply pleased we've set the right tone for the rest of this proceeding and for the licensing process in general, elevating accountability, practicality, and innovation. And so in this item, we're accelerating our process for reviewing satellite applications before we accept them for filing. And we're providing timeframes for the FCC to complete that important process. That is accountability. At the same time, we're eliminating outdated rules that led to time-consuming squabbles about what words like, quote, unbuilt meant without actually doing much to advance the public interest. We're also committing to shed more daylight on the licensing process and to explain what our requirements mean for prospective licensees in practice. That is practicality. And while we're taking steps to accelerate licensing for all systems, we're also removing specific hurdles that tend to slow down and deter applications for groundbreaking ones. Furthermore, we're creating a new streamlined process for Earth station applications with the hope of facilitating next-gen upgrades and a few as-a-service business models. That is innovation. I'm glad to see as well that we revised the item to advance these goals more than the original draft originally did. At my request, we're no longer shutting the door to timeframes for deciding applications on the merits after they're accepted for filing. And then I'd also like to thank Commissioner Symington and his request to committing to build a stronger record for us to decide on whether and how we can do that as well with some of the shot clocks and some of the time frames that we're going to be thinking about. We're also more clearly conveying that while we must ensure new systems comply with our rules, we don't intend to micromanage operators' design choices, especially the ones that are outside of our jurisdiction. And finally, we're taking steps to make our streamlined procedure for Earth stations more practically useful. So this item is an important step towards expedition. And my hope and expectation is that there will be more to come. Thank you to the Space Bureau for all of your hard work. This is an excellent item. Herculean efforts by the team here. And thanks to the chair for this great item as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm happy to say that I support today's item, and I'd like to thank and acknowledge the chairwoman and the other commissioners for the kind words and for their willingness to include specific questions in the FNPRM that seek comment on final action shot clocks for satellite applications. I agree with my colleagues today that the most important part of streamlining the FCC's application processing procedures is ensuring swift and efficient FCC action, which will maintain U.S. leadership in the satellite communication service industry. It will also nurture the growth of the broader space sector, which includes new and innovative manufacturing processes, robotics, Earth surveillance and exploration, and indeed other undiscovered future innovations to come. A strong proposal for shot clocks and streamlined rules that provide certainty to industry are vital to ensuring that we do not mire a budding industry in regulatory sludge that encourages anti-competitive gamesmanship. It's a pity if good intentions get in the way of innovation, and yet, as regulators, we may never recognize the detriments caused by these supposed good intentions if they cause innovations to fail to come. So while it's vitally important that the FCC and other policymakers get things right, as they say, we know that the perfect can be the enemy of the good. I've heard time and again, specifically from US-based companies, that delays in application processing times are forcing them to entertain licensing in other countries with more industry-friendly and expeditious licensing regimes. Obviously, we don't want to encourage regulatory arbitrage either, and we need to insist on high standards. Still, this item is hopefully the springboard to change any such plans. It includes a great start with adopting shot clocks for placing applications on public notice and establishing practices for greater transparency and staff guidance. So now I look forward to working with my colleagues to swiftly take action to execute shot clocks for final action and to take any other steps to change our rules to reflect the current realities of the satellite industry. However, before I say anything else, I have to express my most sincere appreciation to the staff of the Space Bureau for their great work on what I think is a very important proceeding, and I'm looking forward to our next steps.
Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, you know, I started today's meeting talking about the deadly wildfires in Hawaii, and I think I want to talk a little bit more about them because some of those stories that came out of Lahaina are really harrowing. And when I was first hired on Capitol Hill, I worked for Senator Daniel Inouye. So I've spent a lot of time in the Aloha State, and I can definitely say it wasn't a hardship assignment. Hawaii is so lush in so many places and so beautiful. It is just impossible to imagine flames rising on the western coast of Maui. But they did. And of course, we keep in our thoughts those who lost homes and loved ones and now need to rebuild. But I think we also need to pay attention to how people assisted one another in crisis. It is important to understand what warnings work and what systems help save lives. So when the fires were raging, there were 5 young people aged 18 to 30 who found themselves trapped in a white van near the outlet mall in Lahaina. The skies were totally smoky. It was not clear where to go or what to do, so they decided to drive toward the ocean. But the roads to the water were blocked, and poor visibility quickly deteriorated into no visibility. They were stuck in a sea of flames with nowhere to go. Terrestrial wireless services were knocked out, so there was no way to call 911 for help. That van was hot and getting hotter. The situation seemed helpless. But this crew of 5 young people survived, and they're alive today thanks to a new technology. Their phone had a new feature, the ability to connect directly to emergency personnel by bypassing ground-based communications and instead using satellite signals delivered from space. At 6:14 p.m., their message asking for help went out to first responders with information about their location. By 6:47 p.m., they sent a follow-up message to the dispatchers to say help had already arrived. That's incredible. So when we talk about the benefits of space-based innovation, it is easy to crow about the value of the United States leading and the value of the more than $500 billion growing space economy. But I also think it's important to remember that if we do this right, we are unlocking advances that have the power to make us safer in crisis and stronger in day-to-day life. Now, at this agency, every day we get to see how innovation is changing the ways we connect and how those connections fuel just about everything in modern civic and commercial life. But I think you can make an argument that nowhere are these innovations growing as fast as they are in space. Just look at the numbers. Right now, we have applications for more than 56,000 satellites pending before the FCC. That is twice the number we had before this agency just 4 years ago. On top of that, we're seeing new applications for novel space activities like lunar landers, space tugs that can deploy other satellites, and space antenna farms that can relay communications. So we made some changes. We launched the Space Bureau to support United States leadership in the space economy. We facilitated satellite spectrum sharing by modernizing our approach to processing rounds. We updated our approach to orbital debris in order to shorten the decades-old 25-year guideline for deorbiting satellites post-mission. And we're also exploring how to support greater direct satellite-to-smartphone communications and how to bring our spectrum policies into what we call the single network future. And we also launched an inquiry into how communications can support in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing activities, or ISAM, like refueling, inspecting, and repairing satellites in orbit, and capturing or removing debris. It's a lot. So today we take another step forward because What we do, as you've heard from my colleagues, is we streamline the processing of commercial satellite applications. It's a new era, so we eliminate old rules that no longer meet the moment and establish clear timeframes for placing space and Earth station applications on public notice. This makes our process easier to understand for existing players and new entrants alike. On top of this, the Space Bureau is launching a transparency initiative with frequently asked questions, how-to videos, workshops, and more. It's all aimed at providing applicants with tools and knowledge they need to get their applications filed. Our goal is to make it easier for new companies to get the authorizations they need to enter the market. And by streamlining our process for commercial satellite applications, I know we can foster more of the kind of boundary-breaking innovation that brought 5 people home through unimaginable circumstances in Hawaii just a few weeks ago. So let's keep at it. All right, we have a long list of people who worked on this effort, so let me thank them right now. They include Clay Dussel, Steve Duol, Jennifer Gilsonon, Franco Hingenosa, Julie Kearney, Whitney Lomer, Carl Kensinger, Julia Millette, Carrie Murray, Janine Poltroneri, Troy Tanner, and Marissa Velez from the Space Bureau. Jason Kolofsky, Jeremy Marcus, and Michael Rhodes from the Enforcement Bureau. Joy Ragsdale and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. Kate Matraves and Alex Yankovich from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Jamie Coleman, Patrick Forster, Howard Griboff, J.C. Montenegro, Ira Keltz, Nick Oros, and Jameson Prime from the Office of Engineering and Technology. Susan Aaron, Dave Konskal, Andrea Kearney, Anjali Singh, and Jeff Steinberg from the Office of General Counsel, and Simon Banyai, Stephen Buzanow, Peter Duranko, Jessica Griffinius, Carrie Hicks, Alice Kothke, John Lockwood, John Markman, John Schabel, and Blaise Cinto from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. And with that, we will have a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Updating the 5G Fund for Rural America and will be presented by the Office of Economics and Analytics. Julia McHenry, Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. McHenry, please proceed.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairwoman Rosenworcel and Commissioners. The Office of Economics and Analytics is pleased to present for your consideration a further notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would continue the Commission's implementation of the 5G Fund for Rural America and advance the deployment of high-speed 5G mobile broadband service in areas of the country where, absent subsidies, it will continue to be lacking. I would like to thank the staff of the Auctions Division and others in the Office of Economics and Analytics for their hard work on this item. I would also like to thank the staffs from the Broadband Data Task Force, Wireline Competition Bureau, Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Office of General Counsel, and the Office of Communications Business Opportunities for their contributions. With me today from the Office of Economics and Analytics is Valerie Barish, Senior Attorney Advisor in the Auctions Division, who will present the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, Chairwoman and Commissioners. In its October 2020 5G Fund Report and Order, the Commission established the 5G Fund as a replacement for Mobility Fund Phase 2 to distribute up to $9 billion using multi-round reverse auctions in 2 phases to retarget mobile high-cost support to bring voice and 5G broadband service to rural areas. The Commission decided that it would use mobile coverage data gathered through the broadband data collection to determine areas eligible for 5G fund support. This further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would make proposals and seek comment on a limited set of issues that are critical to the 5G fund's success. The further notice would seek comment on whether to define areas eligible for support in the 5G fund Phase 1 auction as those where mobile coverage data submitted in the broadband data collection show a lack of unsubsidized 5G broadband service by at least one service provider, or as those areas lacking unsubsidized 4G LTE and 5G broadband service as adopted in the 5G Fund Report and Order. Regardless of whether the definition of eligible areas is modified, in order to direct support to areas where people live, work, and travel, the further notice would seek comment on limiting eligible areas to Resolution 9 H3 hexagons, or hex 9s, that contain locations and/or roads. The further notice would seek comment on whether to make 5G fund support available to eligible areas in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, or instead explore a dedicated long-term funding mechanism. The further notice would seek comment on whether there are significant reasons to modify the $9 billion budget originally adopted by the Commission, and if so, by how much. The further notice would propose using a bidding and support price metric based on dollars per square kilometer if eligible areas are limited to hex 9s that have locations and/or roads, and would seek comment on whether to use the adjustment factor previously adopted. It would also seek comment on alternatives to using dollars per square kilometer as the bidding and support price metric, such as a metric based on the number of locations, or a combination of the number of locations and unserved road miles in eligible areas, or a metric based on predicted usage from serving eligible areas. The further notice would also seek comment on what aggregation scheme would be an efficient and appropriate way to group eligible hex 9s for bidding in the 5G Fund Phase 1 auction. The further notice would seek comment on the approach to making any necessary modifications to the metric used to measure a 5G fund support recipient's compliance with its public interest obligations and performance requirements. For consistency, the further notice would propose to modify the methodologies used by support recipients to substantiate their 5G broadband coverage in the areas for which they receive 5G fund support. The further notice would propose to treat the release of the public notice announcing the close of the 5G Fund Phase 1 auction to be the point at which support under the 5G Fund commences. The further notice would propose requiring each auction applicant to certify that it has read the public notice adopting auction procedures and has familiarized itself with any requirements, terms, and conditions associated with receiving 5G fund support. The further notice would seek comment on whether to require 5G fund support recipients to implement cybersecurity and supply chain risk management plans as a condition of receiving 5G fund support. And finally, the further notice would seek comment on whether the 5G fund should be used to encourage the deployment of open radio access networks. The Office of Economics and Analytics recommends adoption of this further notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges limited to technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much. A couple of years ago, I remember flying a couple hours straight west of Anchorage, Alaska, out across the Aleutian Islands. You look down at all the island chains, and yeah, we got at about, I don't know, it felt about halfway out the Aleutian chain to a small island called Unalaska, where Dutch Harbor is. Much more famous for some of the Deadliest Catch TV series. That's where it was filmed out of, was Dutch Harbor. But for me, I remember
They
stepping
didn't
off.
build a reality show around your trip?
It would be very compelling television, I think. But I remember stepping off the airplane right onto the runway and switching my phone off from airplane mode, which I mostly stick to when I'm on airplanes, mostly. Not convinced it's a problem. But I remember flipping it off from airplane mode and waiting and expecting to see maybe 1 bar of LTE, maybe just a bar of service without LTE. And I looked down where it usually says LTE on my phone, and it had the words, "no service." And it was the very first time that I even was aware that portion of my phone could display the words "no service." And in fact, I think when it was on airplane mode, I probably had more faint, better service than when I turned it off at the end of the day. And that happened in parts of the country where if you looked at our old maps, they would tell you that there was service. And that happened time and time again. Driving across rural, remote parts of Montana, eastern parts of Washington, those same words of no service appear on the phone. And so the work that we have to do at the FCC to make sure that every American has a fair shot at next-gen connectivity is a big one. It's important. It's ongoing. And when we launched this process a number of years ago to go down the path of the 5G fund, we made the decision to wait until we would get these new maps done. I think at the time we did not anticipate that we would be waiting this long, or perhaps we would have made a different decision. But that's a challenge that comes from initially a lack of funding and then the time it takes to get this type of endeavor done. And so while I obviously, as everybody would have preferred that we would be farther along in this process than we are, I'm glad that we're taking it up right now. And when you step back more broadly, I think one of my top priorities at the agency since I started back in 2017 was to extend U.S. leadership in wireless. And while this is a piece of it, there's obviously a lot of other important parts of the playbook. And one of those is making spectrum available. And by making more spectrum available, that's a key part of bolstering capacity and coverage in addition to what we're doing right here. And starting in 2017, in my first few years on the job, I was really pleased with the swift progress the agency was making to free up more spectrum, not just because Americans were using it to bridge the digital divide, but because it helped create jobs, it helped grow the economy, helped secure U.S. leadership. And with respect to mid-band spectrum in particular, the FCC moved back then with really unprecedented speed between 2017 and 2020. At 3 to 5 gigahertz, for instance, we auctioned 70 megahertz worth of spectrum. At 2.5, we transformed the rules governing 200 megahertz of it and teed up the capacity to have an auction of 100 megahertz of spectrum, which we did not too long ago. At 3.45 gigahertz, we paved the way for an auction of 100 megahertz of mid-band spectrum. At 4.9 gigahertz, we modernized the regulation of a 50 megahertz swath of spectrum. In the L-band, we authorized 30 megahertz for 5G and IoT. At 5.9, we opened up 45 megahertz for unlicensed, and plus we did what I call the big kahuna, the C-band, which was clearing about 280 megahertz of that sought-after mid-band spectrum. And all told, our auctions over those years, licensed and licensed and unlicensed, opened up more than 6 gigahertz of spectrum for licensed 5G. And so there's still a lot more that we need to do at this agency to sort of match the pace and cadence on spectrum initiatives that we were doing the last couple of years. That's why early on in 2021, I laid out a spectrum calendar, identified a number of concrete bands that I thought we could and should take action on that year, 21, last year in 21 and 22. And that included unlicensed as well, moving forward on very low power devices and 6 gigahertz client-to-client devices there. For another, I talked about seeking comment on whether we can increase the power for CBRS use cases in 3.5. And I thought we could also take a look at some underutilized mid-band spectrum areas, including Uni 2C, which is sort of underutilized today because of some cumbersome rules that we have there, and mention a number of other spectrum bands as well. So while I've been pleased to work with my colleagues on a lot of spectrum initiatives, I do think there's more that we have to do to, again, hit that same pace and cadence that we're working on. One thing I think we should do at the FCC is identify target bands that we're interested in and being clear about that and putting out a spectrum calendar that we can sort of roughly all agree on or disagree on, but put it out there. Obviously, all this is to say that Congress can help as well by renewing our auction authority, which would be an important step as we particularly move into the World Radio Conference to continue to show robust U.S. leadership. And so as we move forward on this proceeding, I hope we obviously can keep moving forward on a lot of other sides as well, from more spectrum to more infrastructure reform. I think that's going to be the playbook that's going to help continue to secure and extend U.S. leadership. So as to this item, thanks for working with me and my team. I think we made some good edits, including asking how we can just make sure we're coordinated here in light of all things that have changed since we started this, which is both additional infrastructure dollars and programs to make sure that we're as coordinated as possible as we go forward. So thanks.
Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Wireless devices deliver more than just convenience. They're also a means of finding work, doing that job, even if you already have that, and acing your schoolwork, accessing healthcare, financial services, emergency services, as we heard. And that's why I've long said that when we talk about making quality, affordable broadband available to every American, finally cracking the digital divide, advanced wireless services are and will remain an important part of that conversation. And I am proud to support today's action on the 5G fund. When we first established the 5G fund, I highlighted at that time it's important that we get every last drop out of our universal service dollars, and I noted that the process for allocating those dollars efficiently and fairly starts with gathering adequate data. And that does not risk, of course, leaving these rural communities behind. And thanks to bipartisan leadership in Congress and the hard work of so very many here at the FCC, we now have vastly improved broadband mapping that provides that more accurate picture of where wireless coverage exists, at what speeds, and where greater support is ultimately needed. And so today we propose rules to leverage that clearer data in determining which areas are eligible for receiving support in our reverse auctions. Armed with that better data, we also take a second look at the key aspects of the program, including speed and technology thresholds for eligibility. Importantly, very importantly, we also explore the future mobile support mechanisms in the U.S. Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico. And so with these combined efforts, we're clearing the way to finally deliver on a more than decade-long commitment to fund the next phase of mobile deployments in rural America. One more note, I'm very pleased that we're also taking steps to keep our funded networks secure. Network security is national security. In other proceedings, I've fought hard to ensure that carriers receiving high-cost support observe baseline cybersecurity and supply chain risk management requirements. I ask that we propose similar requirements for this high-cost program here today as well. Rural consumers have already experienced the risks posed by insecure equipment in their wireless networks, including ones funded by our universal service dollars. In fact, due to what I authored an op-ed with Senator Peters earlier this year, due to a shortfall in our RIP and replace funding, some rural folks, even today, could still be living with threats in their networks. Managing cyber and supply chain risks, no doubt, will be part of an ongoing process, but this time around, we should do what we can to get the security piece right from the start. Thank you for the hard work. This item has my strong support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starks. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I, too, am looking forward to Commissioner Carr's reality show, Most Dangerous Climb. So it's also important that we recall and acknowledge.
I really want to see cord cutting accelerate.
Yeah, there we go. So it's also important that we recall and acknowledge that the cadastral effort of broadband mapping represents an unprecedented U.S. government effort in this area. I've been extremely supportive of 5G as a commissioner. I'm enthusiastic about the advanced network engineering that it enables, and especially about what it can do for specialized use cases like high-tech manufacturing and precision agriculture. And without a doubt, 5G is the gold standard for new mobile broadband deployment. And except for special circumstances, the FCC should not be paying for the deployment of previous generation technologies at this point. But I'm also aware that, especially in low-density rural areas and at high-coverage lower frequencies, 5G does not represent a transformational change for end-consumer mobile broadband service. In fact, 5G service in those areas operates on similar bands at similar speeds and with similar performance characteristics as 4G LTE. So when we're deciding where to spend limited funds to subsidize the deployment of 5G, it's obvious to me that we should prioritize areas that don't even have 4G service to speak of before we start paying for upgrades from 4G to 5G. And in fact, that's how our rules adopted in 2020 say the 5G fund should work. Unfortunately, this item seeks, in my opinion, to upend that decision. The draft version outright proposes that we treat areas with existing 4G services being exactly the same as areas with no service at all when it comes to qualifying for 5G fund subsidies. I was disappointed that the Chairwoman's office was unwilling to accommodate my request that we ask about the relative benefit to end consumers of going from 4G to 5G versus going from no service at all to 5G, given that 4G and 5G are likely to offer similar speeds in these areas. Because the Chairwoman's office did downgrade this idea from an official proposal to just something we're seeking comment on, I am able to concur on passage of this item in the interest of getting more public input on the issue, but I will be watching this proceeding closely. Like Chairwoman, then Commissioner Rosenworcel said in her statement on our 2020 5G fund order, these are not communities without 5G. They're communities with no G. And I am not inclined to leave those no G communities behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. This week, the United Nations General Assembly is gathering in New York, and just before that meeting got underway, I did something the Federal Communications Commission has not done in years. I joined the United Nations Broadband Commission to discuss ideas to support universal access to high-speed communications. I believe that one of the best ideas we have is ensuring that the systems we develop for support are based on good data. That is the reason we are talking today about the future of the 5G Fund for Rural America. For the first time in our history of supporting wireless networks through the Universal Service System, this agency has comprehensive data about where service is and is not all across the country. Thanks to the work of our Broadband Data Task Force, we have maps that are light years ahead of what we produced before. We standardized the propagation data that carriers must submit to us twice a year and created new ways for consumers, governments, and others to help verify the data we have when the maps don't really reflect the experiences they have on the ground. As a result, we now know that over 14 million homes and businesses nationwide do not have mobile 5G coverage today. What this means is that as we develop the 5G fund and build the successor to our existing universal service program supporting wireless networks in rural America, known as the Mobility Fund, we will be able to incorporate this detailed picture of where service is and is not. We will be able to see gaps in coverage and ensure support actually reaches the communities that need it most. On top of these data improvements, a lot has changed since the FCC first announced the 5G fund, including, for starters, a global pandemic that underscored the importance of access to high-speed mobile services. So we seek comment on updating the 5G fund proposal in several ways. First, we look at how best to support 5G service so that we can address areas without service and so that we aren't shortchanging rural communities covered by the last generation of wireless technology. Second, we are revisiting the budget so we can better account for the state of the supply chain and current costs associated with deploying 5G networks. Finally, we seek comment on how best to leverage our new maps to target the first phase of funding to places that need it most, where people live, work, and travel. These are important questions, and I look forward to the record that develops. I look forward to combining what we learn from commenters with the information we now have from our maps. And I hope that if I get the opportunity to return to the United Nations Broadband Commission, I can share what we have done to support universal wireless access powered by good data. I want to thank the team behind this effort to build a better 5G fund, and that's Valerie Barish, Craig Baumberger, Emily Burke, Chelsea Fallon, Jill Goldberger, Evan Querrell, Paul LaFontaine, Mary Lovejoy, Kenneth Lynch, Julia McHenry, Gary Michaels, Mark Montano, Jeffrey Oker, Kelly Quinn, Steve Rosenberg, Alexander Simmons, and Martha Stansel from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Jesse Jackman and Suzanne Yellen from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Barbara Esbin, Garnet Hanley, William Holloway, Susanna Larson, John Lockwood, Jennifer Salhus, and Toy Tran from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Michael Jansen, Douglas Klein, and Keith McCrickard from the Office of General Counsel, and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr?
Approve.
Commissioner Starks?
Approve.
Commissioner Symington?
Concur.
The chair votes aye, and the item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you now announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Direct Access to Phone Numbers and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking on direct access to telephone numbers by interconnected voice over Internet Protocol or VoIP providers. This item, if adopted, would modify and strengthen the Commission's rules governing the direct access authorization process to help stem the tide of illegal robocalls, protect national security and law enforcement, safeguard the nation's finite numbering resources, reduce the opportunity for regulatory arbitrage, and promote public safety. The further notice would also seek comment on additional modifications and obligations in furtherance of these same goals. I would really like to thank the Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs, Enforcement, Public Safety and Homeland Security, and Wireless Telecommunications Bureaus, as well as our colleagues in the Offices of Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, General Counsel, and International Affairs for their review and input as well. With me at the table today from the Bureau are Terry Natoli, Associate Bureau Chief, Jody May, who's Chief of the Competition Policy Division, Heather Hendrickson, who's the Deputy Division Chief in that same division, and Mason Sheffa, who will present the item. Over to you, Mason.
Thank you, Trent, and good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. In 2015, in an effort to improve the visibility and accuracy of number utilization in the United States, the Commission established an authorization process that permits interconnected VoIP providers to obtain telephone numbers for their customers directly from the U.S. Numbering Administrator, rather than by relying on a telecommunications carrier partner to obtain the numbers. Since then, there has been a proliferation of VoIP providers that originate calls using their own numbering resources, and that has resulted in a voice network that is more vulnerable to bad actors, especially those that facilitate or engage in illegal robocalling, spoofing, or fraud. This exposes millions of consumers to harmful risks. In 2019, Congress, via the TRACED Act, directed the Commission to examine whether and how to modify its policies to reduce access to telephone numbers by potential perpetrators of illegal robocalls. The report and order before you today furthers Congress's directive in the TRACED Act and would revise and strengthen the Commission's rules pertaining to the direct access authorization process to help ensure bad actors do not abuse our nation's numbering resources. First, if adopted, the report and order would require interconnected VoIP provider direct access applicants to make robocall-related certifications to help ensure compliance with our rules targeting illegal robocalls, which would increase the Commission's enforcement capabilities. Second, because illegal robocalling often originates from sources outside the United States, the order would require direct access applicants to disclose and keep current information about their ownership, including foreign ownership, to mitigate the risk of providing bad actors abroad with access to U.S. numbering resources. Third, the order would require such applicants to certify to their compliance with other applicable Commission rules pertaining to public safety, access stimulation, and their annual reporting of services provided in FCC Form 477, and revenues used to calculate their universal service contributions in FCC Form 499 filings. Fourth, the order would require such applicants to comply with state laws and registration requirements that are applicable to businesses in each state in which they request numbers. Fifth, the order would require such applicants to include a signed declaration that their applications are true and accurate to increase accountability. Sixth, the order would codify the Wireline Competition Bureau's application review, application rejection, and authorization revocation processes. Lastly, the order would direct the North American Numbering Council to study number use, resale, and reclamation to inform potential future action in furtherance of the Commission's public interest goals. The accompanying further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would propose and seek comment on further steps to strengthen the Commission's direct access rules. First, the further notice would propose requiring existing direct access authorization holders whose authorizations predate the new application requirements to submit the new certifications, acknowledgments, and disclosures that would be adopted in today's order. Second, the further notice would propose requiring new interconnected VoIP direct access applicants to disclose a list of states in which they seek to provide initial service, which would create parity with certain other numbering requirements. Finally, the further notice would propose requiring direct access authorization holders that sell, lease, or otherwise provide telephone numbers obtained via direct access to another voice service provider, known as an indirect access recipient, to obtain from the recipient all the same certifications, acknowledgments, and disclosures the indirect access recipient would have had to provide under the Commission's rules if it had itself applied for access to numbering resources. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Well, thank you so much to Mason, to Heather, to the Bureau for all the hard work in this item. I appreciate, always love when there's an anti-robocall hook to any item. So you definitely got my vote on this one. Thanks for the work. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Same for me. This is a very important item, no statement. But we heard a number of things talking about numbering, talking about robocalls, talking about foreign ownership. And so thank you for the hard work by you and the team on this item.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this item imposing better oversight on VoIP providers' access to the numbering system. And I want to thank FCC staff for their tireless technical, patient, and complicated work on ending the scourge of robocalls in this country. If it were easy, it would have happened yesterday. I know how much effort this takes, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. So at the FCC, we are combing through all of our rules and looking for ways to cut off illegal robocalls so those behind us can no longer reach us with their junk schemes. And today, we update our numbering policies to make it harder for these scam artists when they use VoIP services. It was 8 long years ago that this agency actually decided to let interconnected VoIP providers get telephone numbers directly from our numbering administrator. Before that, they could only get numbers if they worked through a traditional carrier. And in the intervening years, we've seen benefits from simplifying this system, including competition. But we're now reaping some of the unintended consequences. Too often, the providers picking up these numbers en masse are the same folks using VoIP technology to facilitate robocalls. So in the interest of curbing these bad actors, we are adopting new guardrails. We're putting conditions on direct access to numbering resources to make sure we don't hand out numbers to perpetrators of illegal robocalls. This is going to safeguard our numbering resources, make life harder for those who want to send us those junk calls, and a little easier for all of us who don't like getting them. So for their work on this proceeding, I really want to thank the robocall response team and staff, including Callie Croker, Ty Covey, Lynn Engeldow, Trent Harkrader, Heather Hendrickson, Ed Kratchmer, Jody May, Albert Lewis, Terry Natoli, Margot Newman, Jordan Reth, Zach Ross, Michelle Shader, Mason Sheffa, Christy Schumann, Gil Strobel, and Raphael Snader of the Wireline Competition Bureau. Loyani Gall, Jessica Manuel, and Daniel Stepanovich of the Enforcement Bureau, John Evanoff, David Firth, and Deborah Jordan of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Cameron Duncan, Jennifer Salhus, and Joel Tabenblatt of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Jerusha Burnett and Alejandro Roark of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Denise Coca, Francis Gutierrez, Gabrielle Kim, David Kretsch, Arthur Lechtman, Ethan Lucarelli, and Thomas Sullivan of the Office of International Affairs, Julia McHenry, Mark Montano, Eugene Kiselev, Eric Ralph, Stacy Jordan, and Pramesh Janaputra of the Office of Economics and Analytics, Terry Kavanaugh, Michelle Ellison, Richard Mallon, Anjali Singh, Royce Sherlock, and Shin Yu of the Office of General Counsel, and Jocelyn James, Joy Ragsdale, and Shauna Wilkerson of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will have a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Space Launch Operations and will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Office of Engineering and Technology. Ronald Rapazzi, Chief of the Office of Engineering and Technology, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Rapazzi, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Office of Engineering and Technology is pleased to present for your consideration a second further.
I knew
should have done more in wireless.
There we go. Yes, wireless mics. There we go. Now I have a live mic. I'll start again. Good morning, Madam
That
Chairwoman.
was an
and
in-house
Commissioners.
joke there.
The Office of Engineering and Technology is pleased to present for your consideration a second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking that seeks to promote development of the U.S. space industry by expanding commercial access to the commercial spectrum needed for space launch operations. The number of commercial space launches in the United States in recent years continues its upward trajectory, going from 9 launches in 2015 to 79 last year. Each of these launches requires the use of radio spectrum to download data from the rocket as well as to send control signaling during the launch. If adopted, the second report and order would support this growing industry by allocating an additional spectrum band for use during launches, as well as by adopting licensing and technical rules that will enable launch providers to obtain licenses to access spectrum for use during launches. The second further notice of proposed rulemaking explores ways that the FCC might be able to provide additional support for the commercial space industry, including the potential use of additional spectrum bands and extending the licensing framework to cover other types of space-related operations. With me at the table are Damian Ariza, engineer in OET's Policy and Rules Division, and Mark DeSantis, attorney advisor in the Wireless Telecommunication Bureau Mobility Division. Damian and Mark will jointly present the item, and they're joined by Carl Kensinger, Senior Special Counsel in the Space Bureau. Damian?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The second report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking supports the U.S. space industry by expanding commercial access to spectrum necessary for space launch operations, as well as by removing certain restrictions on currently allocated spectrum. Space launch operations require reliable access to spectrum for various types of communication, including telemetry, tracking, and telecommand services. In 2021, the Commission issued a first report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that adopted a secondary non-federal allocation for the 2200 to 2290 megahertz band for commercial space launches. Use of this allocation was limited to 4 subbands and was restricted to pre-launch testing and space launch operations. The further notice of proposed rulemaking sought comment on a number of proposals to enhance access to spectrum during space launches, as well as technical and licensing rules for spectrum use during space launches. To that end, this second report and order would remove the existing subband limitations in the 2200 to 2290 megahertz band, thus making the entire band available for space launch operations with pre-launch testing on a secondary basis. Furthermore, this second report and order would add a secondary mobile allocation to the band, which would also be limited to pre-launch testing and space launch operations, with pre-launch coordination with NTIA being required. Finally, this second report and order would amend the allocation table to allow commercial space launch operations in the 2025 to 2110 megahertz band on a secondary basis. These operations would be limited to space launch telecommand transmissions occurring after coordination with NTIA and non-federal terrestrial licensees prior to each launch. I now turn the presentation over to Mark DeSantis from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau.
Thank you, Damian. The draft second report and order also adopts licensing and baseline technical rules for the new commercial space launch services to support 2 important objectives. First, to keep pace with the evolving spectrum requirements of commercial space launch operations. Second, to protect vital federal operations in the 2025 to 2110 megahertz and 2200 to 2290 megahertz bands. This draft establishes a licensing framework that will grant nationwide non-exclusive licenses to non-federal entities that conduct space launch operations in these bands. This licensing framework will reside in a new Part 26 of the Commission's rules. It permits shared use of these bands and allows space launch operators to file for a single license for operation over a range of different launch sites and frequencies. In addition, the draft defines the scope of the space launch services and the types of entities that will be eligible to hold licenses. The draft permits telemetry, tracking, and command activities concerning the launch, re-entry, or recovery of a launch vehicle. Eligibility for a space launch services license is limited to non-federal entities that conduct space launch operations. Further, the draft second report and order adopts specific licensing rules governing shared frequency use, authorized bandwidth, license term and renewal, as well as application filing. To protect both non-federal and federal operations, promote more efficient access and sharing of these heavily used bands, and facilitate interoperability of launch operations, the draft requires per-launch coordination to be led by a third-party frequency coordinator and adopts baseline emissions and power limits similar to those already applicable to federal space operations. Following adoption of this item, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau intends to seek comment on and further refine the application filing and coordination processes to be followed by space launch operators. Finally, the item seeks further comment on whether to adopt licensing and operating rules for payload activities, as well as modifying our existing 2360 to 2395 megahertz space launch rules, and on possible additional licensing provisions for suborbital launch vehicles. These actions will encourage the continued development of a robust U.S. commercial space sector to the benefit of national interest in security, prosperity, and science. For these reasons, we recommend adoption of this item and request staff editorial privileges solely for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you. That deserved its own presentation.
It does, for sure.
All right. Now we'll hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
I will spare you all a rehash of my statement before, but again, as I said there, thank you so much for all the work on this. This type of stuff is vital, going faster with applications, getting better on spectrum availability as well. So thanks so much to the team for the hard work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
I, on the other hand, have fresh commentary that needs
Always
to be
fresh.
said.
Always
Yes,
fresh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Earlier, of course, we voted on an item to streamline our satellite licensing rules. Earlier this year, we adopted a spectrum framework to spur entry by new NGSO systems. Those were important steps that will drive innovation, competition in the commercial space. But if we truly do want to be successful, we can't just focus on what happens in orbit. We also need to account for the precious few minutes that it takes to get an object into space. And so that means our efforts must also focus on the launch. There's plenty of opportunity for progress. For years, launch providers have relied on cramped and uncertain spectrum access authorized piecemeal by special temporary authorities, STAs. And while that Band-Aid approach may once have proved adequate, it certainly is no match for the new cadence of a frothy commercial space industry where days, not weeks or months now separate each launch on average. Remember that each launch costs millions to execute, carries many millions more in terms of the value of the payload. So if we want to make it attractive to invest in new and greater commercial space opportunities, a more efficient and more predictable launch clearance process is the place to start. In 2021, we made a down payment on fixing the problem. Today, we reach liftoff. Consistent with bipartisan legislation on this issue, we expand access to the 2200 to 2290 megahertz band, identify additional launch spectrum in the 2025 to 21110 megahertz. We also stay ahead of potential growth and demand by seeking comment on ways to free up the 2630 megahertz band and on ways to support the spectrum needs of emerging endeavors like commercial crew and cargo missions. Equally important, we establish a predictable licensing regime that will move providers away from tedious launch-by-launch authorizations while fully protecting other federal agencies and facilitating the process of coordinating with them. A special thanks, of course, belongs to the leaders in Congress who helped create a blueprint for today's actions with efforts like the Launch Communications Act. So thanks, of course, to Senators Hickenlooper, Schmidt, Representatives Soto, and Dunn in the House for their leadership on this issue. Thanks to the chair for bringing this very important item. Thank you to OET for their hard work as well. The item has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Unable to match the freshness of Commissioner Stark's takes, I'm just going to affirm my support for today's item and to thank the staff at OET for the hard work on this important item. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioners. 6 weeks ago, I had the honor of visiting Kennedy's Space Center. I met with NASA Administrator Bill Nelson and scientists throughout the complex. But the highlight of the trip was meeting the Artemis II crew, because they're soon going to become the first people to visit the moon in over half a century, including, I should add, the first woman in person of color. The rush of that trip and meeting with the crew was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And I came back and thought about it. Why did I feel that way? I think it's because space exploration reminds us of what is best in us. It reminds us that we are a nation that pushes boundaries and pursues discoveries. We do this, as President Kennedy so famously said last week in 1962, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Because the skies inspire us to push the limits of human achievement, communicate in new ways, and understand our own planet like never before. And in this country, we've done it before, and we are about to do it again. So what is so exciting about the future of United States space exploration is that the Artemis mission is far from the only major endeavor we're working on. You see, coming up, NASA will launch its Psyche mission with a commercial operator, sending a spacecraft to land on an asteroid orbiting the sun between Mars and Jupiter. This kind of commercial space activity is multiplying. The number of space launches is multiplying fast. So our policies need to keep up. We have to ensure that providers have a more consistent and more reliable way to get the bandwidth they need for communications during space launches. And historically, we provided access to the airwaves for space launches using special temporary authority. But this cobbled together approach, it's just not well suited to an era where commercial launches are happening with far greater frequency. So today we announce we're allocating airwaves specifically to support commercial space launch activity. We're making our process simpler and more open to new entrants. It will better facilitate coordination with our federal partners through the use of a frequency coordinator. After all, launches are nail-biting undertakings under ideal conditions, so let's hope this is going to make them easier and also boost competition. I want to thank our colleagues at NTIA and the Department of Defense for working collaboratively with us on this effort. I know they join us in supporting United States leadership in the space age. I also want to thank the staff responsible for this effort: Damian Ariza, David Duarte, Michael Ha, Nick Orris, Siobhan Philemon, Jameson Prime, Ronald Rapazzi, and Tom Struble from the Office of Engineering and Technology. Linda Chang, Mark DeSantis, David Hu, John Lockwood, Roger Noel, Paul Powell, Arpan Sura, Joel Tabenblatt, and Peter Trachtenberg from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Joseph Hill, Julie Kearney, Carl Kensinger, Julia Millette, Catherine Medley, and Marissa Velez from the Space Bureau. David Konskal, Shin Yu, Deborah Broderson, David Senzel, Anjali Singh, and Jeffrey Steinberg from the Office of General Counsel. Nicholas Copeland, Patrick Sun, and Alex Yankovich from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Gregory Baker, Neshe Gondelsberger, Dante Ibarra, and Ethan Lucarelli from the Office of International Affairs. Jeffrey Newman from the Media Bureau. Jason Kolofsky, Jeremy Marcus, Paul Nohn, Josh Zeldis from the Enforcement Bureau, Michael Gusso and Joy Ragsdale from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, and Nicole Ongoli from the Office of Managing Director. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington. Approve. The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is an Enforcement Bureau action and will be presented by the Enforcement Bureau. Layan Egal, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Because this item is an Enforcement Bureau action, we're going to switch the order up just as the Commission has done in past cases that involve similar presentations at open meetings. With all open meeting items, the Bureau circulated this item to every commissioner at least 3 weeks ago. But there's a long-standing practice at the agency that we do not publicly disclose parties involved in enforcement matters unless and until the Commission decides to take action. For these types of items, this means the agency formally votes the item, then here's a brief presentation from the Bureau before proceeding to any statements that the commissioners may have. This process ensures that these sensitive matters will not be publicly disclosed until the FCC has voted to take action. So we are following that precedent here. That means we will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks,
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges if requested. Mr. Egal, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, Commissioners. Thank you for your consideration and your votes on today's item, a forfeiture order imposing a $116,156,250 forfeiture penalty for violations of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. The targets of this order are Thomas Dorsher and several companies that he operated: Chartel Inc., Ontel Inc., and Scammer Blaster Inc. Together, we refer to these parties as the Dorsher Enterprise. The Dorsher Enterprise perpetrated an illegal scheme to harass toll-free customers with millions of pre-recorded robocalls in order to generate credits to fund telephone denial of service, also known as TDOS, attacks against individuals and businesses. Dorsher's illegal robocalling scheme reached millions of toll-free customers. In July of 2020, the Commission issued a notice of apparent liability against the Dorsher Enterprise. In November 2020, a federal grand jury in the District of Utah indicted Dorsher for, among other things, conduct related to his TDOS activities. While Mr. Dorsher has contested liability under the NAL, the Bureau has carefully considered his arguments and remains steadfast in its determinations. We now take the next step in holding the Dorsher Enterprise accountable for its actions. With me at the table today are Daniel Stepanisic, Assistant Division Chief, and Alexander Hobbs, Attorney Advisor in the Telecommunications Consumers Division. Alex will now present the item.
Thank you, Loyan. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. This forfeiture order imposes a $116,156,250 forfeiture against the Dorsher Enterprise for violations of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA. Over the course of approximately 2 months in early 2021, the Dorsher Enterprise made nearly 10 million pre-recorded voice message calls to toll-free numbers without consent or an emergency purpose. The robocalls purported to be public service announcements, informing the recipients about the harms of scam calls and recommending that the recipients report such calls to the FCC, the recipient's carriers, and Dorsher's website, scammerblaster.com. The Bureau verified that 20,650 of these robocalls violated the TCPA. The Dorsher Enterprise intentionally targeted toll-free numbers because it was compensated for each call placed to a toll-free number. When a caller makes a toll-free call, the toll-free service provider, typically a long-distance carrier, pays the caller's local exchange carrier, or LEC, for originating the call and for performing the toll-free database query. In some cases, as in the present matter, the LEC will share the revenue in the form of credits with its customer who made the call. The Dorsher Enterprise used the credit generated from these robocalls to toll-free numbers to launch TDOS attacks against what Dorsher characterized as, quote, verified scammers, unquote. TDOS attacks are extremely reckless and dangerous as they can interfere with emergency services. Independently of our action, on November 22nd, 2022, a federal grand jury in the U.S. District Court for the District of Utah indicted Dorsher and others on multiple federal criminal counts related to these TDOS attacks. While this forfeiture order determines the TDOS attacks warrant an upward adjustment of the proposed forfeiture, it only assesses a per-call penalty for the pre-recorded voice messages to toll-free numbers that the Bureau verified and not the TDOS calls. On July 14th, 2022, the Commission adopted a notice of apparent liability against the Dorsher Enterprise. Dorsher responded with several arguments contesting liability. We found none of these arguments to be convincing. The Dorsher Enterprise intentionally targeted toll-free numbers and knew that subscribers of toll-free numbers were charged for calls placed to those numbers. The Dorsher Enterprise also had no reasonable basis to make those calls, such as consent or an emergency purpose. For these reasons and the additional detail laid out in the forfeiture order, the Enforcement Bureau appreciates the Commission's adoption of this item and the grant of editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear any comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thank you so much to the team for your hard and diligent work on this. At the end of the day, I'm shocked that the investigation found that a company named Scammer Blaster was engaged in a scam. Sometimes it is the ones that you suspect, but we had a record to know to look into this, and we did it in an open-minded way. And at the end of the day, the facts showed what they did, and so really appreciate the work of the team on this. So it has my support. Thanks.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, I have a longer statement, but, part of the facts here bear repeating. In less than 3 months, the Dorsher enterprise placed more than 9 million robocalls to toll-free numbers. Dorsher made money off of each and every one of these calls, though an access stimulation agreement at the expense of toll-free subscribers. He then used that money to fund telephone denial of service attacks that disable telephone networks, disrupt critical emergency services. So, as always, commend the great work, Chief, and the team for the Enforcement Bureau in revealing these facts. It also bears mentioning, of course, that this matter was brought to the attention of the Bureau by a real tool that we have found here, the Industry Traceback Group. And as I've said repeatedly, there are numerous hurdles to finding these bad actors, bringing them to account for their violations, and so this is another example of the hard work that it takes, and well done.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. No comment at this time, other than to note that when I was personally trying to parse the cause, effect, and chain of actions in this case, I found it immensely confusing. So, together with the motives of the parties at issue, and I would also note that that people say the telephone system is dead, and yet we wind up seeing a surprising number of access stimulation items brought forward. So it's good that we still have people who know how to deal with all of this. Much appreciated.
I agree with you, Commissioner Symington, and the team did a really amazing job. So the scammers behind robocalls are nothing if not persistent, but so is the FCC. We're not going to stop fighting the good fight to block these annoying calls from our phones. So today we follow through on an investigation and finalize a $116 million fine against a company whose scheme it was to make money off of phony toll-free calls. In total, we've referred now over $500 million in robocall fines to the Department of Justice for collection this year. This week, we also put providers on notice to block traffic from another offender if it fails to clean up its act. This time, it's a company called One Owl, which is a company that had previously popped up on our radar, enabling illegal robocall traffic under the name One Eye. We know how this game works. The bad actors behind these scams know when we're on to them, like when we told providers to block One Eye's illegal traffic in May, so they set up an entity under a new name. But we are finding new ways to stay on their trail, and this notice that we released this week is evidence of just that. In addition, this week we brought on another ally in this fight. The Rhode Island Attorney General signed a memorandum of understanding with us to share resources to combat illegal robocalls. That means we're up to 47. 47 state attorneys general now working with us to stop these junk calls. That's progress. But for us to keep at it, we're going to need some new updates to the law. First, the fine we issue today, we will hand over to our colleagues at the Department of Justice. But to hold those who violated our rules accountable, I think this agency should have the authority it needs to go to court and collect on our own. Second, in a recent decision, the Supreme Court narrowed the definition of autodialer under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, making it easier for bad actors to evade consequences under the law. That also needs a fix. But back to what we have done today, I want to thank the robocall response team and the staff responsible for this action, including Daniel Stepanisic, Jane Van Benton, Alex Hobbs, Christy Thompson, Victoria Randazzo, Rakesh Patel, and Loyan Eagle from the Enforcement Bureau, Christy Thornton, Mark Stone from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Elizabeth Drugula, Zachary Ross, Jonathan Lecter, Eric Raven Hansen, and David Zeisiger from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Xin Yu, Valerie Hobbs, Richard Mallon, and Anjali Singh from the Office of General Counsel, and Michelle Schaefer, Ed Keurig, and Kenneth Lynch from the Office of Economics and Analytics. All right. Would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? We'll start with you, Commissioner Carr.
Nope, thanks.
You got nothing to say. All right, Commissioner Starks.
Thank goodness. No, I do have jokes.
Okay.
I do have a couple of announcements. As always, It is that time of the season. I have new interns that I want to announce. The first is Daryl Clue, who is a 2L at Howard University Law School. Daryl is here today. Stand up. Yes, thank you. And so when you see Daryl, and he is already doing a lot of great work in the office, do feel free to say hi and let him know if you see him in the halls what you're working on, and he's deeply interested in telecom issues. Thank you, Daryl. I also have Vaishali Nambar, is a rising 2L at George Washington University Law School. In my office, I also have Marie Bordelon, is a 3L at William and Mary Law School. And then finally, I have Cheyenne Richards, a 3L also at Howard University Law School, and she is my early career diversity initiative intern this semester. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Simonton, any announcements?
Thank you. I too would like to announce my fall interns. With us today, we have Sarah Ramju, a Catholic Law at JD Expected 2025. She received her BA in Criminal Justice from the University of Maryland in 2017 and her MBA from American in 2020. Furthermore, she speaks Farsi, Turkish, and Azeri fluently, in addition to being an accomplished artist. So those are all things that are utterly beyond me, so I'm glad someone can do them. Let's see, we also have Danny Doherty. I don't believe he was able to attend today. Right. Georgetown Law, JD Expected 2024. He received his BA in History and Philosophy, and also with a minor in Marketing, so really covering the waterfront there. He is an avid mug collector, but I had to have it explained to me that this was not, in fact, about facial recognition technology. We have two remote interns as well this term. Joe Verdi from Brooklyn, coming to us from Brooklyn Law, JD Expected 2026. He speaks Italian, adding to the list of languages in my office that I do not speak. He was selected to be the 1L delegate for the Brooklyn Law Student Bar Association as well, so it's great to see him getting involved. And finally, we also are happy to have John Lewandowski with us, coming to us from Hofstra Law, JD Expected 2026. He speaks Polish and Spanish, so this is really a theme. And in addition, he's an Eagle Scout. So I'm glad to say that I have all sorts of people who have all sorts of accomplishments, and I'm just scratching the surface here, looking forward to working with them and learning from them all.
Well, thank you, commissioners. Before we adjourn, I got a lot of announcements, so just get comfortable. We got comings, we got goings, we got celebrations. It's all coming at you right now. So we're going to start with goodbyes to two members of the FCC family. Michael Karowitz is departing the FCC after spending a total of 28 years here. He first arrived at the commission in 1991. He worked with the policy division of what was then called the Common Carrier Bureau. And in 1994, he moved to the enforcement division and worked on the commission's consideration of the AT&T McCaw Wireless merger. Soon after, he led the team that implemented the 1996 Act's provision on payphones. He left the agency in 1997, but he later returned in 2002 to lead a team with the Wireline Competition Bureau working on long-distance service. We got a lot of communications history here. In 2005, he moved back to the Enforcement Bureau, where he served as Chief of Staff, and then he joined the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, where he was Deputy Bureau Chief and spearheaded the overhaul of the consumer complaint process. Michael was named Acting Chief of the Enforcement Bureau in 2017, and then he moved to the Office of the Chairman as Special Counsel. In 2021, he returned back to the Enforcement Bureau, where he served as Deputy Chief until this month. When we asked him about his long tenure, he said it was the result of participating in high-quality, cutting-edge work product, and most of all, the top-notch people at the agency. So thank you for always being top-notch yourself, Michael. We wish you best in your retirement. We're also saying goodbye to Tracy Wiesler, who after nearly 30 years, she brought the FCC to the world and the world to the FCC. She is leaving her position as Senior Advisor in the Office of International Affairs to teach at the Haas Center for Public Policy at Stanford University. She joined the commission back in 1995. She's worked on a whole bunch of digital economy policy issues that affect our international purview, primarily focusing on European, U.S. telecommunications, wireless, internet, and mobile satellite matters. In 2002, she was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to France where she taught at a leading university, consulted with the telecommunications regulator, and researched the evolution of internet-based services in the United States and France. She also served as chair of the OECD's Working Party on Communications, Infrastructure, and Services Policy. So I want to thank Tracy Weisler for her dedication and her leadership supporting our national and international priorities. We wish her well. Now for some additions. I want to start by welcoming our new chief economist. Dr. Johan Bauer. Dr. Bauer might be new to the building, but he's not new to the Commission's issues. He has served as the director of Michigan State's Quello Center for Telecommunications Management and Law, which might sound familiar to some of you here because it's named after the legendary FCC Commissioner Jim Quello. So if we have any veteran staff with stories about Commissioner Quello, now is the time to offer them up. You're laughing. I think there probably are some stories. All right, so Dr. Bauer is both a respected academic researcher and practitioner. He was educated as an engineer and a social scientist, and his research has focused on advanced communications technologies like 5G, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things. And on the ground, he's done work in broadband access, deployment, and digital equity. In his role as chief economist, Dr. Bauer will bring an understanding of the latest research, foster the professional development of the FCC's economists, and ensure economic and data analysis of the highest quality. He's taking a leave of absence from Michigan State to serve as chief economist, and we are very excited to have him as part of the team. We also have some changes in our communications team that we're going to be announcing shortly, so I'm getting ahead of myself, but here goes it. Jonathan Uriarte will be joining my office as Director of Strategic Communications and Policy Advisor. He comes to the Commission from Senator Schumer's office, where he served as Hispanic Media Director and Press Secretary. He's going to work closely with our Office of Media Relations, which I'm pleased to say now has Paloma Perez as its Communications Director. Paloma has been our go-to press secretary for the last few years, and I'm really pleased she'll be moving on to this new role. Also, Will Wilquist will now move up to Deputy Director and Policy Advisor in the office following the departure of Ann Weigel. While we were sad to see Ann leave given her contributions to the FCC, I'm pleased to say she's taken her skills to the United Nations because she's working with our good friend ITU Secretary General Doreen Bogdan-Martin. Now I'm going to close with a celebration. In the end, I think the greatest strength of this agency is its people, and I think our FCC staff stacks up against anyone else's in and out of government. And today we're going to honor some of the best of the best. So it's my honor to announce the winners of this year's Excellence in Economic Analysis and Excellence in Engineering Awards. Our Excellence in Economic Analysis Award goes to Lester Roberts for his outstanding work to make emergency alerts more resilient. That's so important. Now, Lester designed a program that allows the Commission to better and more quickly review state emergency alert system plans to determine if they comply with the monitoring assignment redundancy regulations. And this work has helped to make sure that individuals are able to receive alerts in the event of network outages. And that's work that can save lives. Our Excellence in Engineering Award goes to John Gabrish of our Media Bureau. Who is not here today, but we are going to celebrate him nonetheless.
Working hard.
Yeah, they're all working hard. John developed innovative tools and methodologies for analyzing interference in the AM radio service. So this work's had huge impact on the Commission's decision-making process for licensing AM radio stations. It's made it a whole lot more efficient, and it's accelerated the approval of AM filings and ensures AM stations provide the best service to their listeners. So for effectively serving the public, the FCC is going to have to tackle a lot of complex engineering and economic issues. And so I really want to thank Lester and John for all you have done to help the Commission fulfill its mission and promote the public interest. We really appreciate your service. All right, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, October 19th, 2023.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
All right, if everyone could take any conversations outside, we're about to begin the press conference. Excuse me, if everyone could take any conversations outside or quiet down. We're going to start the press conference, please. Thank you so much. So good morning, everybody. We're going to have the press conference. My name is Will Whitequist from the Office of Media Relations, and with that, I will hand it off to Chairwoman Rosenworcel.
And then there was one. All right, let's get it going.
Chair, I don't know if this is working.
It is, I can hear you.
Happy autumn to you. I wanted to ask, I guess it's fair to ask at this point, what the FCC's first priority will be once there's Commissioner Gomez here. And could you kind of walk us through that?
Well, let's pause for a moment. We had 4 members of the agency here today. We'll have 5 in the not-too-distant future, so I would recommend you stay tuned. I feel like you're certainly permitted to have a follow-up. The benefit of being the only one here. And I also want to clarify, I started by referencing pumpkin spice season. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, okay. We hear that often. I did actually, I wanted to ask about some of the sharper GOP criticism that has been lodged recently. I'm sure you've heard, even on the Senate floor. I'm wondering how you actually respond or feel about it when, say, for example, Senator Cruz talks about, uses phrases like radical left-wing agenda to describe your policies.
As with everything before this agency, we look at the record and we follow the law.
Is there any way you could elaborate just a bit on?
I think that actually gets to the heart of it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. With that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Katie Gorsak for the Bureau press conference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. I'm going to try to make this quick. So, Chris, we're going to start with the first agenda item on today's proposed rulemaking on facilitating and expediting application processing for satellites. So do you have any questions on this particular item?
I was only wondering whether there were any changes from the draft.
Okay, Space Bureau folks? And if you could just repeat that, Chris, thank you.
Thank you. I just was wondering if there are any significant changes from the draft that was issued.
Yes. First, we made adjustments in the order on the auto grant process, and we made some adjustments to account for the coordination requirements, as well as adding some questions on those issues in the FNPRM about how that auto grant procedure could be expanded in the future. We also added questions in the FNPRM on the extension of grants for STA and whether those could be filed concurrently with initial applications for an STA. We added a paragraph in the order addressing comments regarding certifications for technical showings. And then finally, we asked questions about establishing timeframes or shot clocks for action on the merits of applications.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll move on to the 5G fund. Chris, question? Yep.
Yeah, just one.
Sure. If y'all could come up.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, Commissioner Symington had concurred on the item. I'm wondering if you could address what that issue was and how it was handled in the drafting of the item.
So I think the issue is related to the definition of what eligible, seeking comment on the definition of eligible areas. And so the question is just, we made a few changes from the white copy draft to focus on a little bit, to make it more neutral, I think, between the definition being 5G and 4G versus 5G, or 4G and 5G.
Okay, so, but the rationale for that will be in the
Yes.
voted upon draft. Okay, thank you. So,
Thank you.
All right, next we'll move on to the Wireline Competition Bureau item related to direct access rules for legal robocalls. Nothing on this item? Okay. Next is our very large group of bureaus involved item on spectrum allocations. Do you have questions on that one, Chris?
no, thank
Nope, okay. And last, we have today's enforcement item on Scammer Blaster. Did you have any questions on this?
you. No, thank you.
Okay, great. Then that ends our Bureau press conference. Thank you so much for your time.
I think I have it. Can you hear that? Okay. So I'll start at the top. Just congratulations again to Anna Gomez, soon to be Commissioner Gomez, as soon as she's fully sworn in here at the FCC. Look forward to working with her, I guess, as soon as next week. So we'll see how that goes. I do want to note there's also been a lot of discussion recently, as was indicated in your question, about what the FCC might do once we are fully constituted back to 3-2. And one hot topic that has been discussing a lot is whether the FCC is going to head back down the path of Title II and utility-style regulation. And on that front, I thought something actually very significant happened this week. The two former Solicitor Generals from the Obama administration, Verrilli and Heath Gershengorn, filed a really interesting paper that looked very specifically at the major questions doctrine in particular. And what their really detailed paper lays out in very clear terms is that there's been a total sea change in the law on this issue since the FCC last attempted this effort to go down the path of Title II. In fact, their paper is so compelling, I want to offer just a couple words for it. One of the things they say in this document is they say a commission decision reclassifying broadband as a Title II telecom service will not survive Supreme Court encounter with the major questions doctrine. It would be folly, they say, for the Commission and Congress to assume otherwise. And I want to say that again, will not survive a Supreme Court encounter with the major questions doctrine. These are the two top appellate lawyers from President Obama's administration. These are the lawyers that were charged with representing the United States in court, in the Supreme Court of the United States, that have studied this closely. Now, they make clear in their policy, in their paper, that they don't necessarily agree with the policy of the doctrine of major questions doctrine, but it is a firm reality. They walk through in this paper all of the cases of the last couple of terms that have confronted with this and been turned away by the court. What they say in their paper as well is they said it would be a wasted effort, their words. They said that it would waste countless resources. Again, the two top appellate lawyers from President Obama's administration. And so I think it's really important, as we sort of move forward the next couple of days, weeks, or months, we keep this in mind. You know, the FCC has vital priorities that we need to prioritize and we need to make progress on. More spectrum, more infrastructure reform, bridging the digital divide, rural broadband, 5G. These are all tasks that take a lot of effort and bandwidth here at the FCC. And if this agency, despite the very considered views of the two Obama administration SGs, heads down this path, we will take all of those priorities and we won't simply put them on the back burner. In many cases, we are just going to simply knock them off the stove entirely. I think it's very important that this agency continue to stay focused on delivering results for the American people that are in the public interest. And again, as these two Solicitor Generals, former Solicitor Generals said, it would be folly for the FCC to head down that path. The right thing, as this paper lays out, is the question of net neutrality is one that has been properly left under the Constitution, under the separation of powers, in terms of going forward on this issue, for Congress to resolve. And if we care about this, we should be working to maximize the chances of success with legislation. Because again, not my words, but the words of President Obama's Solicitor Generals, this is an easy one. The Commission lacks authority. With that, happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Would you support using that mechanism to pursue any rulemaking on net neutrality?
Look, I think first and foremost, you have to ask yourself, what is the problem that we're attempting to solve? And not just as a policy matter, but as a legal matter, right? As part of this sort of APA review of an agency action is the basis for it. And if the concern at this point is discrimination that's taking place with respect to bits on the internet, you know, we are in 2023, not 2015. And so we have to sort of take cognizance of what has happened in that intervening time period. And what's happened is the discrimination that's taking place in the internet ecosystem is not and hasn't been taking place at the ISP level. In fact, we have rules in place today, from transparency to disclosures, that apply to the conduct of ISPs that have very strong consumer protections in place. But where the discrimination has been taking place has been at a different part of the internet ecosystem by a lot of technology companies that very plainly and admittedly are discriminating, whether it's bits, against applications, against speech. And so I think when you ask, is there a basis and a need for a regulatory action that is focused solely on the ISP layer as opposed to the layers in the stack where the discrimination is taking place, I think almost regardless of your policy views, it would be very difficult to sustain that as a legal matter. That said, I think there is a tremendous amount of common ground when it comes to net neutrality. When you talk about basic rules of the road, no blocking, no throttling, simple bright line rules, there is a tremendous amount of common ground there. And if people are interested, whether in Congress or here, in finding a way to put bright line rules in place that avoids all of the collateral damage and consequences that come from utility-style regulation of the internet, then those are conversations that should take place. But opening the door to going back down this path of utility regulation of the internet would be a serious mistake.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Peanut gallery? Anyone watching online? Bomb in with a quick text question? All right. See you next week. Thanks so much.